In July of 1925, in Dayton, Tennessee, the conflicting ideologies of evolution and creationism were put on trial. John T. Scopes was tried and convicted of violating the Butler Act, a recently passed state law banning the teaching of evolution in public schools. The ruling of the Scopes trial upheld the law until its repeal in 1967. In 1968, the Epperson v. Arkansas United States Supreme Court case challenged the teaching of the Genesis creation narrative as told in the Bible. The court's decision states that all anti-evolution laws violate the First Amendment. Yet the conflict continued into the 1990s when supporters of the creationist ideologies proposed a controversial compromise of intelligent design, which again challenged the way evolution is taught in public schools. In 1859, Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species. The book presented the scientific theory that argued humans descended from a lower level of animals, specifically monkeys. It also introduced the idea that populations evolved over time through a process of natural selection. In 1871, Charles Darwin published his second book, The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. This book focused on the relevance of evolutionary theory to society, with natural and sexual selection being interconnected. Darwin's ideas were very advanced at the time. American schools were currently teaching the Genesis creation narrative, which suggested the origin of the universe and life was based in Christianity. Darwin's books caused tremendous backlash in society as they contradicted the core value of Christian faith. The contradiction of the two perspectives created a debate of evolution versus creationism. Although creationism was still being taught in schools, society slowly began to accept Darwin's theories. By the late 1800s, evolution was being taught in schools alongside creationism. In the early 1900s, society's concerns about evolution resurfaced. In the United States, people began to see a more organized divide between two ideologies, the fundamentalists and younger modernists. Following World War I, there was a perceived longing for a simpler pre-war life. Many fundamentalists believed that anti-evolution laws represented a return to pre-war normalcy. Fundamentalists disagreed with the theory of evolution, for it conflicted with the Genesis creation narrative. In March of 1925, the fundamentalist versus modernist debate was a rising conflict. In Dayton, Tennessee, John Washington Butler, a member of the House of Representatives, drafted a state law called the Butler Act. The law stated it was unlawful to teach any theory that denied the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible. Additionally, any teacher in a state-funded school caught teaching evolution would be guilty of a misdemeanor and fined for each offense. The heavily fundamentalist viewed House adopted the law. The American Civil Liberties Union was founded in 1920. Their sole purpose was to uphold the Constitution. The ACLU found the Butler Act to be unconstitutional, so they placed an ad for a teacher to go against the law in a test trial. John T. Scopes, a 24-year-old substitute science teacher at Rhea County Central High School, saw the ad and applied. On May 7, 1925, Scopes was arrested for violating the Butler Act. He was not even sure he had actually committed the crime. Scopes had read aloud from Hunter's Civic Biology, a state-approved textbook with a chapter containing information on the theory of evolution. Though Scopes did not show his own views on evolution, his trial date was set for July 10th of the same year. The ACLU offered Scopes legal support for the case and appointed Clarence Darrow, a leader of the ACLU, as his defense attorney. The prosecutor's attorney was William Jennings Bryan, a former U.S. Secretary of State and presidential candidate. The trial lasted for 12 days. On the last day of the trial, the hearing was held outside because of the weather. During his turn to speak, Darrow called the prosecuting attorney Bryan to the stand and proceeded to question him about his beliefs in the Bible. Bryan admitted on the stand more than once that he did not take the Bible's creation story literally. Bryan was publicly humiliated.
Bryan up there, sitting on the stand, and Darrow looking down at him and asking him a question and pointing at him. And it's estimated there were about 2,000 people. They thought they'd come to see the closing arguments, but what they got was Darrow's cross-examination of Bryan. Probably the most famous scene in American legal history, and it didn't take place in a courtroom.
The jury left and delivered a verdict only minutes after the closing argument and found Scopes guilty. He was to pay a $100 fine. Though Scopes was put on trial for violating the Butler Act, the trial itself became a public debate between evolution versus creationism. The Scopes trial had a significant impact on society. Following Scopes' conviction, many other states began to pass anti-evolution laws. This led to the amount of evolution being taught in public schools to drop dramatically, for many teachers were afraid of being convicted. Although the teaching of evolution had decreased, there were virtually no textbooks in Tennessee that did not include the theory of evolution. A few months after the trial, Tennessee, along with other states, began banning textbooks with any relation to evolution. This caused many authors to either rewrite and republish their books or have them taken off the shelves. Preacher George McReady said, "Virtually all textbooks on the market have been revised to meet the needs of all fundamentalists." By the 1930s, a pro-evolution commentator, Maynard Shipley, expected that around 70% of all public high schools in the U.S. had removed evolution from their curriculum and were teaching the Genesis creation narrative. It was not until 1967 when Tennessee's Butler Act was repealed. In 1968, Arkansas passed a law saying that it is illegal to teach evolution in schools. Susan Epperson, a teacher in the Little Rock School District, was told to teach out of a textbook containing information of evolution. Unwilling to go against her school, she filed a suit to test the federal constitutionality of the state law. The trial made its way to the United States Supreme Court, where the court said that the law violated the First Amendment. They ruled that all anti-evolution laws are unconstitutional. The ruling solely made it more publicly and socially acceptable to begin teaching evolution, for now states could not pass laws banning it. In 1987, Louisiana passed the Balanced Treatment for Creation Science and Evolution Science in Public School Instruction Act, commonly called the Creationism Act. This required creation science to be taught alongside evolution. The Supreme Court ruled the Creationism Act unconstitutional as it furthered the idea of religion in schools and therefore violated the First Amendment. Soon after, fundamentalists started thinking of a compromise between the two theories so that some form of religion could be taught in schools.
Sure. We wouldn't have science if there wasn't compromise between science and religion. All the early scientists believed there was a God. All of them. And they wanted to study through mathematics and experiment the design that God built into the universe.
Booming in the 1990s, fundamentalists argued that intelligent design should also be taught alongside evolution. Intelligent design is a very controversial theory, stating that some things are better explained by an intelligent cause other than natural selection.
So the short definition of intelligent design says that life on Earth arose only because of the special act of God in designing the cell, basically. The first single-celled organism is a miracle, in other words.
Intelligent design was believed to be a compromise for fundamentalists and modernists to agree on a way humans came to be. Intelligent design was incorporated into public schools' curricula from the 1990s until the early 2000s. This compromise led to more conflicts. In Kitzmiller versus the Dover Area School District trial in 2005, local parents, represented by the ACLU, believed that intelligent design was a creation science. The case ruled that intelligent design was unconstitutional and banned from public schools. The conflict on whether to teach evolution or creationism has continued today in both public schools and society. After the Scopes trial, science curricula were redesigned to eliminate evolution from public schools. When the Butler Act was repealed in 1967, a series of legislation followed and deemed that anti-evolution laws violated the First Amendment. The compromise between fundamentalist and modernist ideologies continues, with the recent conflicts on intelligent design and debate about creation theory. The debate recently has been put into the national spotlight.
It's also bringing to the minds of all of our children all of the theories about the unknowable that some bright day in the future, through science and perhaps through faith, we will find the truth of from whence we come.
The struggle to come to a compromise highlights the complexity of religious practice and belief in the United States today.